He went to prison a martyr. He came out a kingpin. Marcus spent 8 years in a concrete hell for a woman who vanished. But the secret he found outside is more dangerous than anything behind bars. A dying daughter and a debt that can only be paid in blood. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a masterclass in justice. This is Black Soil.
Locked behind iron gates, the man had learned to listen to his own silence. The decision he'd made on that rainy night years ago had confined the rest of his life to concrete walls. But Marcus was no longer just a prisoner. As he walked the prison corridors, what he saw in the eyes of other inmates was a mixture of fear and respect. His story had become a legend that transcended the walls themselves. The first light of morning could only seep into his windowless cell through the crack of the door. Marcus sat on the edge of his cot, hands on his knees, staring at the blank wall. Outside was freedom, but for him the concept of freedom had long been redefined. 8 years ago he had taken the fall for a crime he didn't commit, all for the woman he loved. He could never forget the terror on Elena's face, the shattered glass, the splattered blood, and the moment she dropped the gun with trembling hands. Marcus had picked up that weapon, smeared his own fingerprints over it, and surrendered to the police. Elena was free, but Marcus's freedom had ended that night. The first few years were hell. Prison was a place that rotted not just bodies, but souls. Marcus counted the days in silence, thinking of Elena's face at night. He had written to her, not once, not 5 times, but 19 letters. In each one he said the same thing: "Don't worry, I love you. You are free now." But no reply ever came. Maybe she was ashamed. Maybe she had started a new life. Marcus didn't know, and he didn't want to know. All he wanted was for time to pass. But as time passed, Marcus changed. Inside the prison was a shadow organization known as the Raven Brotherhood. This group held the fate of everyone inside in its hands. Their leader, an old man named Dmitri, had looked at Marcus differently the first time he saw him. Dmitri had the kind of eyes that could see right through people. His face, etched with deep lines, carried the scars of the past. In Marcus's silence, he saw strength. In his obedience, he saw loyalty. Their first encounter was in the mess hall. A fight had broken out, and Marcus stepped in. Without saying a word, he calmed the situation with just a look. Dmitri watched this, then summoned Marcus to his side.
"You're different, kid," the old man said. "In here, everyone fights to survive, but you look like you're ready to die for something." Marcus didn't answer. Dmitri smiled, a cold but understanding smile. "Is it for a woman?" Marcus's silence was his answer. Dmitri nodded. "I see. Love either makes a man a god or destroys him. We'll see which one it is for you." Over time, Dmitri took Marcus under his wing and taught him the secrets of the organization. But it wasn't just about violence and power. Dmitri taught Marcus chess, made him read poetry, and explained how to read the human soul. "True power," Dmitri would say, "is not in your fists, but in your head. A man can beat 10 people with his fists, but he can lead 1,000 with his mind." Marcus learned. He learned not just how to fight, but how to read people, understand power dynamics, and lead silently. He was now aware of the small businesses within the prison, the cash flow, the drug trade, and the arms smuggling. The way Dmitri treated him like a father slowly touched the frozen emotions inside Marcus. When he learned Dmitri had cancer, Marcus felt a pang of grief. The old man grew weaker, yet he maintained his leadership. In his final days, Dmitri called Marcus to his side. "Son," he said in a faint voice, "only 2 things are real in this world: power and loyalty. You have both. I'm leaving the organization to you."
Marcus protested. "I'm not a killer. My being here is the result of a misunderstanding." Dmitri laughed, a laugh full of pain. "That's exactly why I'm choosing you. A killer can't lead an organization. An organization needs a vision. It needs a soul. You will give them that soul." Dmitri died that night, drawing his last breath in Marcus's arms. There was no funeral. In prison, deaths passed in silence, but Marcus organized a ceremony for Dmitri. All the members of the Brotherhood gathered, standing in a silent tribute to their fallen leader. From that day on, Marcus was the leader. This decision was both an honor and a heavy burden. Marcus was now a king within the prison walls, but his crown was invisible and his throne was a cold cell. His days were spent with plans and strategies. He learned the organization's outside connections, communicating through coded letters. The notebook Dmitri left him was like a treasure map. Inside were names, addresses, bank accounts, secret warehouses, everything. As his release date approached, Marcus grew increasingly restless. He was going out after 8 years, but he didn't know what he would find. When he thought of Elena, he felt a bitter void in his chest. He had forgiven her, but he couldn't forget her. The sacrifice he made for her had stolen his life, but it had saved hers. Or so he thought.
When the day of his discharge arrived, Marcus's suitcase held only a few belongings and Dmitri's old notebook. At the prison gate, the other inmates looked at him with respect. Some bowed their heads, others offered a salute. Marcus walked without looking back. As the heavy iron gates slammed shut behind him for the last time, he heard the sound of freedom, but it wasn't the hopeful sound he expected. It was filled with anxiety. No one was waiting outside. No Elena, no family, no friends. Marcus was alone, just as he had been 8 years ago. He started walking, his feet feeling like strangers to the asphalt. The city had changed. Buildings were renovated. People looked different. The cars, the clothes, the sounds, everything was foreign. Marcus felt like he had dropped onto another planet. He took a bus to his mother's house. The journey was long. Marcus stared out the window. The city was no longer the place he once knew. When they reached the outskirts, the houses began to look familiar. His mother's house was a small, old place with faded paint. The garden was neglected, the door colors stripped away. When he knocked, the sound of footsteps from inside made his heart race. The woman who opened the door was his mother, Julia, but Marcus struggled to recognize her. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her eyes pale and tired, her hands trembling. When Julia saw her son, she froze, her mouth agape, her eyes wide. Then she let out a cry and threw her arms around him. Marcus stood in his mother's embrace but couldn't reciprocate. His arms hung at his sides. His body was stiff and distant. Julia was sobbing loudly, her tears soaking into Marcus's chest. Something broke inside Marcus at that moment, but he showed nothing on the outside. His mother led him inside, holding his hand as they went into the living room. The house smelled of old age, dampness, and loneliness. Julia sat across from him and began to talk. The words poured out of her, fast, fragmented, and full of pain. Marcus listened in silence. Every word was like a knife to his chest. Elena had found out she was pregnant while Marcus was in prison. At first, she thought about ending it, but she couldn't. The child was Marcus's. She couldn't kill it. But she never had the courage to tell him. Shame, fear, guilt, it was all there. She had given birth to a little girl and named her Sophia. But Elena realized she couldn't escape her dark past. She had debts. She had connections to dangerous people. That night, the man she was holding the gun against wasn't just some random stranger. He was a drug dealer, and Elena owed him money. He had threatened her. Elena had panicked, and she had taken the gun. While Marcus was in prison, the other dealers had tracked Elena down. The debts grew, and the threats escalated. Realizing she couldn't protect her child, Elena left Sophia with Julia and vanished. Julia had searched for her daughter but couldn't find her. Rumors swirled in the neighborhood. Some said Elena had fled to another city. Some said she got hooked on drugs. Some said she was dead. Julia was living only for her granddaughter now, but the old woman's strength was fading. She had no money and her health was failing. Marcus listened in silence. His mother's words reached his ears, but other voices echoed in his head. He had learned he had a daughter, a child he had never met, and Elena, the woman he had sacrificed everything for, was gone. The rage inside Marcus began to simmer. The emotions he had suppressed for 8 years were becoming uncontrollable. "Where is Sophia?" Marcus asked, his voice low and strained. "Upstairs, sleeping in her room. But Marcus, the girl is sick, very sick." Julia explained. Sophia had been born with a heart condition. She needed surgery urgently, but the surgery was incredibly expensive, over $100,000. Julia had no money. The old woman tried to get by doing cleaning and laundry, but it wasn't enough. The debts were piling up, and Sophia's health was deteriorating every day. The doctors said time was running out.
Julia looked at Marcus, her eyes pleading. "Son, please save your daughter. Do something for her. I don't know how, I don't know where from, but do something." Marcus stood up. A storm was raging in his mind. 8 years ago he had sacrificed himself for Elena, and now his own daughter was close to death. And where was Elena? She was gone, but Marcus would find her trail. He would save his daughter and find out what happened to Elena. And if anyone had harmed his family, Marcus would find them and settle the score. "I want to see Sophia," Marcus said. Julia led him upstairs. The stairs creaked and the walls were damp. Sophia's room was small but clean. Pink curtains, teddy bears, sketchbooks. The 7-year-old child was sleeping in her bed. Her face was pale, her breathing uneven. Marcus stood in the doorway, looking at his daughter. Sophia looked like Elena, the same ash-colored hair, the same soft features, the same thin eyebrows. Marcus entered and knelt by the bedside. He wanted to touch Sophia's forehead, but pulled his hand back. His hands felt dirty, as if he had no right to touch his daughter. He didn't feel worthy. He had never been in his daughter's life. How could he be there now? Sophia murmured in her sleep, her small hand clutching the blanket. Marcus's eyes welled up, but the tears didn't fall. The pain inside him had grown so deep that it could no longer find a way out. Julia came to his side and touched his shoulder. "They gave us 3 months for the surgery. If we don't find the money in 3 months..." Her voice trailed off. She couldn't finish. Marcus stood up. "I'll find the money," he said. His voice was steady and cold. "I'll find the money and save my daughter." Julia looked into her son's eyes. What she saw there frightened her. Marcus's gaze had changed. The soft boy his parents had raised was gone. In his place was a cold, determined, dangerous man. Marcus opened Dimitri's notebook. He flipped through the pages, reading the names. The organization's connections in the city, the sources of income, the weapon caches. It was all there. Marcus decided to rebuild the Brotherhood. But this time, he wouldn't fight just for power, but for justice, his own brand of justice. His first task was to find one of his old friends, a man named Luca, who had been released from prison with him. Luca was doing small-time jobs on the outside, car theft, selling fake IDs, but he was loyal to Marcus. They met in an old cafe. Sophia smiled when she saw Marcus. "Boss, you're finally out. What's the play?" Marcus explained his plans. They would find Elena, they would save his daughter, and they would punish those responsible. Luca nodded. "I'm with you, boss, whatever it takes." The clues they followed led them to the city's dark alleys. In old warehouse buildings and abandoned factories, they talked to drug dealers.
When Marcus spoke with that cold determination in his eyes, people told him the truth. Fear was his most powerful weapon. That was what he had learned in prison. People don't fear power, they fear resolve. While tracking Elena, Marcus came across a name, Viktor Drakov. He was the biggest drug kingpin in the city, and the man responsible for Elena's old debts. Viktor was of Eastern European origin, ruthless, brilliant, and well-connected. Half the city feared him, and the other half worked for him. Marcus began gathering intel on Viktor. The man wasn't just a criminal, he had ties to politicians, police, and even judges. He had undermined the city and built his own empire. Touching him meant touching the entire system. But Marcus didn't care. Dmitri had taught him, power is gained not just with guns, but with information, and Marcus now had access to that information.
One night, Marcus caught one of Viktor's men. He was a small-time dealer, working at the street level. Luca brought him to an old warehouse, and Marcus began the interrogation. "Where is Viktor?" Marcus asked. The man resisted, but not for long. Marcus didn't resort to physical violence. He just stared, that cold, deep stare. The man broke and started talking. Viktor's main headquarters was a mansion outside the city, but it was impossible to get close. It was heavily guarded. "Do you know Elena?" Marcus asked. The man's expression changed. Fear appeared in his eyes. "Yes, I know her. Viktor is keeping her. At the mansion." Something snapped inside Marcus. "What do you mean, keeping her?" "Viktor, he has her prisoner. He keeps her drugged. She's weak. But he didn't kill her. He's keeping her alive for some reason." Marcus let the man go and walked outside. He couldn't breathe. His chest was tight. Elena was alive, but in what condition? Viktor was holding her captive. 8 years ago, Marcus had sacrificed everything for Elena. Now, Elena was a prisoner because of him. Luca came up to him. "Boss, what do we do?" Marcus turned, a feral determination in his eyes. "We're going to find Viktor, but first, I have to find the money for Sophia." Marcus researched Viktor's cash flow. The notebook stated that Viktor had several secret warehouses in the city. One of these warehouses held cash, drugs, and weapons. Marcus made a plan.
At midnight, Marcus and Luca, along with 3 other loyal men, raided one of Viktor's warehouses. The warehouse was in the industrial district, inside an abandoned factory. There were guards, but Marcus dealt with them silently. The fighting techniques he had once learned in prison were now saving lives. When they got inside, the warehouse was filled with crates. Marcus opened the safes. Inside were hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, more than enough for Sophia's surgery. But Marcus took only what was needed, $300,000. He left the rest. This wasn't a robbery, it was an act of justice. With the money, he immediately arranged Sophia's surgery the next day. Hospital fees were paid, and the best cardiologists were found. Julia cried of joy, thanking Marcus over and over, but Marcus's face remained expressionless. He was doing what was right, but his emotions were still frozen. Saving Sophia was just the first step. Now it was time to find Elena. On the day of the surgery, Marcus waited at the hospital. He paced the corridors for hours, sitting, standing, pacing. Julia was beside him, prayer beads in hand, whispering prayers. The surgery lasted 8 hours. Marcus didn't eat, he didn't drink, he just waited. When the surgery was successful, the doctor came out with the good news. Sophia was saved. Her heart was repaired. She could now live a normal life. Julia collapsed to her knees and cried. Marcus leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. The tension inside him eased slightly, but it wasn't over yet.
While Sophia was recovering, Marcus went after Viktor. He was determined not to kill the man, but to save Elena. But the only way to find Viktor was to enter his world.
Using Dimitri's old connections, Marcus gathered loyal men from across the city. The Raven Brotherhood was being revived, but this time Marcus was the leader. The men trusted him unconditionally because Marcus gave them not just money, but a purpose. They mapped out Viktor's mansion, studied the security system, and counted the guards. Marcus planned the assault down to the smallest detail. This was a war, and Marcus had no intention of losing. On the night of the assault, the team surrounded the mansion. They silently scaled the walls and disabled the cameras. The guards were caught off guard. Marcus led the way, gun in hand, rage in his eyes. The skirmish was brief but violent. Some men were wounded, but Marcus didn't stop. When he entered the mansion, he confronted Viktor in the great hall. Viktor was a handsome, cold man, dressed in a suit, hair slicked back, a condescending smirk on his face. He laughed when he saw Marcus. "Who are you to enter my home like this?" Viktor asked, his voice calm but threatening. Marcus didn't answer. He just moved forward, his steps heavy and purposeful. Viktor drew a gun, but Marcus was faster. In one move, he twisted Viktor's arm and knocked the gun to the floor. Viktor tumbled down, looked into Marcus's eyes, and what he saw there terrified him. The man before him was no different from a monster. "Where is Elena?" Marcus's voice was low and menacing. Every word was like a blade. Viktor didn't want to answer, but when the knife in Marcus's hand drew close to his throat, he began to speak. "In the basement, but you don't want to see her. That woman is gone. There's only a wreck left."
Marcus left Viktor there and headed to the basement. After a dark corridor, he reached a locked door. He kicks the door in, and when he entered, the sight devastated him. Elena was sitting on a dirty mattress in the corner. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were vacant, her body thin and broken. There were needle marks on her arms. Her skin was pale and sickly. When she saw Marcus, she didn't recognize him. There was nothing in her eyes, no fear, no hope, no love. Marcus knelt beside her. "Elena, it's me, Marcus." His voice was trembling, but Elena didn't react. She just stared blankly, as if Marcus weren't even there. Marcus took her hand, but Elena pulled it back, as if she were afraid to be touched. Something shattered inside Marcus. The woman he had saved 8 years ago was now a ghost. Viktor had destroyed her, and Marcus had been unable to prevent it. His rage turned into a profound sorrow. Tears welled in his eyes, but didn't fall. He took Elena in his arms and gently lifted her. "I'm getting you out of here. You're safe now." Elena didn't resist, but she didn't accept him either. She just existed there, detached from life, her weight almost non-existent. Marcus carried her outside and handed her to his men. "Take her to the hospital, to the best doctor. Give her the best of everything." Then he returned to Viktor. Viktor was still lying on the floor, blood trickling from his wound, but that arrogant look remained. Marcus looked at him. There was neither rage nor mercy in him, only a cold void. "Because of people like you, the world is like this," Marcus said, his voice hollow and dead. "You taint everything, people's lives, their hopes, their futures, but your time is up." Viktor laughed, a painful laugh, blood seeping from his mouth. "What happens if you kill me? Someone else will take my place. That's how the system works. You're just a man. The system is infinite." Marcus didn't respond. Viktor's words were true, but Marcus didn't care. He simply drew his gun and pressed it against Viktor's forehead. Viktor's laughter cut off. A final fear appeared in his eyes, followed by acceptance. Marcus pulled the trigger. The sound echoed through the mansion. Then silence fell. Marcus dropped the gun and looked at his hands. Were these the hands of a killer?
or a bringer of justice. It didn't matter anymore. He walked outside. His men were waiting. Elena was in the car, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes still empty. Marcus got in, and they returned to the city in silence. There was no one on the night streets, just them and the darkness. In the following days, Viktor's death created a massive vacuum in the city. Power struggles began among organizations, police launched investigations, and newspapers ran headlines, but no one found Marcus. He was silently sitting by his daughter's side. Sophia began to recover after the surgery. Her color returned, and she started to smile. Marcus came to the hospital every day, sitting by her bed. When Sophia looked at him, she looked at him like a stranger.
"Who are you?" she had asked on the first day. I'm... Marcus couldn't get the words out. Julia stepped in. "He's your father, Sophia. He loves you very much." Sophia tilted her head shyly. "Why didn't you ever come?" Marcus's throat tightened. "Because I couldn't. But I'm here now, and I won't leave again." As the days passed, a slow bond began to form between Marcus and Sophia. The girl asked questions about her father, and Marcus tried to answer. Every question deepened the guilt inside him, but it also closed the distance between them. Elena went into rehabilitation. She was receiving treatment for drug addiction at a private clinic. It would be a long process, maybe years, and she might never be the same again. But Marcus was determined to support her. He felt indebted because the suffering he endured for her had ultimately led to her suffering too. Marcus began organizing his affairs in the city. Viktor's death had left a power vacuum, and Marcus was the only one who could fill it. But this time, it would be different. Using Dmitri's notebook, he restructured the organization. The drug trade was shut down and replaced with legitimate businesses. He founded construction companies, restaurants, and security firms. He provided jobs for former inmates and educational support for youth on the streets. The Raven Brotherhood was no longer a criminal syndicate. It was a community outreach organization. Marcus chose to transform power rather than destroy it.
But, of course, not everyone accepted this. Some of Viktor's old crew rose up against Marcus. Small skirmishes broke out. Threats were made. Marcus responded to each in the same way, with a mix of power and mercy. If someone came around, he gave them a chance. If they resisted, he neutralized them. One night, Marcus sat in the garden of his mother's house. The stars were shining, the breeze was light, and the air had cooled. Julia came and touched her son's shoulder. "I'm proud of you," she said, her voice soft and sincere. "I don't know what happened, but you've changed. You've become a better man." Marcus didn't answer. He just touched his mother's hand. Words weren't necessary. Julia understood. She understood everything. Sophia came out from inside, wearing her pajamas and holding her teddy bear. She sat on Marcus's lap. "Daddy," she said. The first time she had called him Daddy, her voice hesitant but genuine. "Will you play with me tomorrow?" Marcus's eyes welled up, but the tears didn't fall. He just hugged his daughter, hugged her tight. "Yes, honey," he said. "Tomorrow, every day, always." Months passed. Marcus visited Elena regularly. She was slowly recovering, but she was still fragile. She acted shyly when talking to Marcus, as if she felt ashamed. One day, Elena asked him, "Why did you do this for me, Marcus? Why did you stay inside for 8 years?" Marcus looked out the window at the cloudy sky. "Because I loved you," he said, "and I wanted you to be free." Elena closed her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But I ruined your life." Marcus turned and looked into Elena's eyes. "No, you saved my life. Because if I hadn't been inside, I wouldn't have met Dmitri. I wouldn't have learned. I wouldn't have grown strong. And now I couldn't have saved our daughter." Elena cried, long and hard. Marcus didn't comfort her. He just sat and waited. Sometimes people just need to cry.
When she left rehab, Elena had changed significantly. There was life in her eyes again, color in her face. She smiled when she saw Marcus, a shy but real smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice still cracked but determined, "for saving me." Marcus nodded. "You sacrificed everything for me. Now I've done the same for you." Elena looked into Marcus's eyes for a long time. "But we're not the same people anymore. The past is behind us. You're someone else, and I'm someone else." Marcus knew this was true. Between them was no longer love, but a deep understanding. They were once lovers. Now they were two strangers who had shared the different pains of life. But they had something in common: Sophia. "Let's raise Sophia together, separately but together. She needs both a mother and a father." Elena nodded. "Yes, for our daughter." Over time, they established a routine. Sophia spent half the week with her mother and half with her father. Marcus witnessed every day of his daughter's life: school plays, birthdays, the first bike ride, the first boat trip, the first failure, the first joys. He couldn't compensate for the years he missed, but he could build the future. Elena built a new life. She opened a small cafe and made pastries. Business was good. People liked her. She didn't talk about her past. No one knew her story, and Marcus wanted it that way. He wanted Elena to be at peace.
Years passed. Marcus's empire grew, but it remained in the shadows. He no longer appeared in public. He stayed in the background. Rather than using power, he protected it. The city was changing. Crime rates were dropping, and people felt more hopeful. One evening, Marcus visited Dimitri's grave. It was in the old cemetery, quiet and peaceful. Marcus knelt before the grave and placed his hand on the cold stone. "I promised you," he said quietly, "I would lead the organization, but not like you, my way. I hope you're proud." The wind rustled the leaves as if Dimitri were answering. Marcus stood up, turned, and walked away. The past was behind him. Now there was only the future. When Sophia turned 15, Marcus told her the truth: why he was in prison, what had happened to her mother, how he had killed Viktor. The girl listened in silence. Then she cried, but finally she said, "Dad, I don't know if what you did was right, but I love you, and I understand." Marcus slept well that night. For the first time in years, he truly slept well. Years later, Marcus had become an old man. His hair had turned white, his face was wrinkled, but that determination remained in his eyes. Sophia had grown up and had her own family, a daughter of her own. When Marcus held his granddaughter, he felt the cycle of life. Everything he had once lost had now returned to him. Perhaps in different forms, but it had returned nonetheless. Marcus was no longer regretful. He wasn't sorry for the choices he made, because everything had brought him to this moment. His granddaughter in his arms, his daughter happy, his mother at peace. Elena had aged too, but she retained her beauty. She still worked in her cafe, serving people. Marcus visited her occasionally. They drank coffee and talked without talking about the past.
One night, sitting alone in the old house, he thought about the past. Prison, Dimitri, Viktor, the fights, the blood, the tears. They were all just memories now. Marcus hadn't forgotten them, but he was no longer their prisoner. He had become free, innerly free. He looked out the window. The city lights twinkled in the distance. Marcus smiled, a small but real smile. Life wasn't fair. It never would be. But life was also beautiful, with its own moments of pain and sweetness. Marcus had learned this, paying the price for it. And now, sitting in his armchair as an old man, he had found peace. Not total peace, but a peace that was enough for him. The past wasn't forgiven, but it was accepted. The future was uncertain, but it was full of hope. Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Life went on, and he went on, living, because living was the greatest revenge. Surviving was winning. And Marcus had won. For 8 years he had seemed to lose, but in the end he had won. Because the real victory wasn't gaining power. The real victory was protecting the people you love. And Marcus had done just that. When he drew his last breath, Marcus wasn't alone. Sophia was there. Elena was there. His granddaughter was there. They were all crying, but Marcus was smiling, because it was finally time to rest. And Marcus rested, in the black soil, beside Dmitri, in peace.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next story.